Story 1. The cold grip of the night had settled in by 9 p.m., and I, Casey at 16, was alone in the house for the very first time. As creepy as that may sound, I was actually relishing the idea of my movie night. But an hour into the film, everything went black. I froze for a moment, thinking maybe it was just a scene transition in the movie. But then the room remained inky black, and the house lost all its ambient noises. The refrigerator's hum, the clock's ticking, and even the film's faint dialogues, they all disappeared into the void. I reached for my cell phone, but it was as dead as the lights since I had forgotten to charge it. Remembering the circuit breakers in the basement, I hesitated for a moment before eventually building up the courage to head downstairs. Each step made me wish I had charged my phone. The basement was colder than I remembered, and darker too. Plus it had that musty smell I never really got used to. I felt around for the switchboard, but was distracted by a table in the corner. Even in the dim light, I could make out old newspapers spread across it. Curiosity piqued, I walked over. The headlines caught my eye immediately. Break-ins, a series of them, right around our neighborhood. But the unsettling part was that most of them happened when there was a teenager home alone. I tried laughing it off, telling myself it was just a coincidence, but my nerves were on edge. Heading back upstairs felt like an escape, yet as I entered the kitchen, small things began to stand out. The glass of water I had been drinking from, now empty. And I could have sworn I left some popcorn on the counter, but it was nowhere in sight. The back window, which I was positive I'd locked, was open just enough to let in a hint of cold night air. Each sound jolted my heart. Was that just the house settling? Or was someone mumbling? Did I just hear the breeze, or were those footsteps on the porch? The living room seemed like the safest option, spacious with clear views of the doors and windows. I sat there counting the seconds, every tick of the clock echoing in my ears. By the time 3 a.m. came, my anxiety was off the charts. The sound of someone rattling my bedroom door handle upstairs was clear as day. Someone was in the house. There was no other way to explain it. Panic set in, thoughts raced. I quickly ducked down behind the couch, trying not to make a sound. The invader seemed to know what he was doing. The creaking of the floorboards, the soft touches on the doorknobs, it was all methodical. And the pauses, those were the worst. Was he trying to hear if I was moving? The sounds grew closer to where I was. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he'd hear it. There was a moment of silence, followed by the unsettling sound of a drawer being opened, then closed. Was he looking for something or just rummaging through our belongings? I strained to hear, trying to guess his location. My breath caught in my throat when I heard a soft humming. The melody was unfamiliar, adding to the eeriness. His presence had turned my home, my sanctuary, into a prison of terror. I recalled a self-defense technique my older brother had shown me. If it came to it, could I use it? I hoped I wouldn't have to find out. As I lay there, time seemed to slow. The intruder was lingering longer in some rooms than others, perhaps searching for valuables. The soft chime of a cherished family ornament hitting the floor had me biting my lip to stifle a sob. My memories were being violated. Then the most dreaded moment came, the sound of footsteps nearing the living room. They became heavier, more deliberate. The light from the street lamp outside cast a shadow on the floor that began to grow larger. He was nearing the couch. As his outline became clearer, adrenaline surged through my veins. I waited, muscles coiled like a spring. The second he was close enough, I lunged at his legs, but he sidestepped, dodging my desperate attempt. I stumbled, the shock apparent on my face. Before I could recover, he grabbed my wrist, his grip cold and unyielding. Panic took over as I tried to pull away, thrashing and kicking. His other hand shot out to cover my mouth, smothering my screams. My mind raced. The odds seemed against me, but I had to keep fighting. With all the strength I could muster, I bit down hard on his hand. He yelped, loosening his grip just enough for me to break free. Gasping for breath and with fear driving me, I bolted towards the front door. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding with mine in a terrifying rhythm. I barely managed to fling the door open, my voice finally breaking through as I screamed for help. As luck would have it, Mr. Wilson from next door had been coming home late. He saw the commotion and began shouting, making the intruder hesitate just for a moment. That brief pause was all I needed. I sprinted with renewed energy, not stopping until I reached Mrs. Peterson's house 3 doors down. After a sleepless night, I returned home the next morning with Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Wilson by my side. The police had combed the house but found no trace of the intruder. Yet, a chill ran down my spine when I entered my bedroom. On my bedside table was a folded piece of paper. I picked it up hesitantly and read the short message scribbled in messy handwriting. "I'll be back." The ominous words served as a chilling reminder that the terror wasn't truly over, and the intruder's shadow might loom over me for days to come. Story 2. My childhood home was nestled in the heart of a quiet, woodsy suburb, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. You'd never expect anything out of the ordinary to happen there. One crisp autumn day, Mr. Jenkins, our elderly neighbor whose yard was perpetually blanketed with leaves, asked for my help. Being the neighborhood's go-to kid for odd jobs, I didn't hesitate. Hours passed, and we worked side by side, the rhythm of our rakes the only sound breaking the stillness. As the sun started its descent, Mr. Jenkins, with his customary affability, decided to walk me home. Maybe it was a sense of protection, or maybe just the old-fashioned kindness that was his trademark. Whatever it was, I was thankful for the company. Upon reaching home, we were immediately struck by muffled sounds from the upper floor. It was unmistakably my mother's voice, carrying down the stairwell as though she was engaged in a deep phone conversation. Confused, I called out for my father, but silence was the only response. Mr. Jenkins, pausing in the doorway, remarked, "Your mom seems busy. I'll speak to them some other time." With a reassuring pat on my back, he stepped out, the fading light outlining his receding figure. With growing trepidation, I made my way upstairs, the wooden steps creaking beneath me. Every corner I turned, every room I checked, there was no sign of my mom. That familiar warmth and smell of home suddenly felt alien. I couldn't shake off the eerie sensation that someone or something was watching me. Panicking, I grabbed the landline and dialed my dad's number. The few seconds it took for him to answer felt like an eternity. "Dad? Where are you guys?" "We're still at the store, kiddo," he replied, confusion evident in his voice. "Been out for a couple of hours. Why?" Fear gripped me tighter. "But I heard Mom. She was talking upstairs." Silence met my declaration. Then softly he responded, "We're on our way." I didn't wait inside. Rushing out, the chilled air hitting my face, I perched on the front steps, my eyes constantly darting around, half expecting some apparition to emerge from the shadows. When my parents finally arrived, their faces etched with concern, we went through the house together, every nook and cranny, empty. My mother, pale and visibly shaken, finally spoke. "This isn't the first time I've felt something off about this house." My father, usually the skeptic, looked equally disturbed. "Let's not spend the night here," he murmured, almost to himself. The days that followed were a flurry of activity. We learned that decades prior, a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to my mother had lived and died in that very house. The circumstances of her demise remained shrouded in mystery. We moved shortly after, yet every time I pass by that old neighborhood, I can't help but feel the weight of unseen eyes on me. And sometimes in the dead of the night I'd wake up, imagining I hear the faintest whisper of a voice, eerily similar to my mother's, beckoning me back to the house. Story 3. It was a night that forever haunted my memory. A tumultuous storm raged outside, and I, Sarah, was home, alone for the first time ever. I'd always thought of myself as pretty grown-up for a 16-year-old, but this was different. My parents had left earlier that day, reminding me of the rules and trusting me to take care of the place. I figured I'd indulge in some Chinese takeout and binge-watch some shows to distract from the eeriness of being alone. Just as I settled in with my spring rolls, the storm outside began to intensify. The wind blew so hard it made our old wooden house creak. The windows rattled, and I noticed drafts I'd never felt before, even during previous storms. Pulling the curtain shut, I tried to shake off an uneasy feeling that had started to creep in. Earlier, while my parents were still packing, there had been this odd incident. The back door had slammed shut on its own. We'd laughed it off, blaming the wind, even though there wasn't any breeze then. My dad had even made a joke saying, "Looks like we have a ghost." But now, alone with the storm howling, that memory wasn't so funny. To top it off, I kept hearing these random noises from upstairs, creaks, the faintest shuffle, almost like footsteps. Maybe the house was just old and the storm was playing tricks on me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't completely alone in that house. Hours seemed to crawl by. I felt an eerie sensation of being watched. With each gust of wind and patter of rain, my anxiety grew. At 11, that strange whistle echoed from the hallway. It had a pattern, 3 short whistles followed by a longer one. Was it the wind playing tricks or something else? Then, a loud knock at the front door jolted me. Hesitating briefly, I looked through the peephole. Nothing. The empty front yard and my lonely car were the only things I saw. I unlocked the door, half expecting some neighborhood kid to jump out and shout, "Gotcha!" One of those silly pranks teenagers pull during storms. But when I opened the door, only a cold gust met me. On closer inspection, an odd footprint was on the welcome mat, wet and muddy, yet there was no sign of anyone. But relief washed over me as I spotted a parcel by the doorstep, thinking the knock was just the delivery guy dropping off an overdue package. That must be it, I thought. With a small laugh, I mused at how jumpy the storm had made me. Back inside, though, my sense of security was short-lived. The TV in the living room was going haywire. Channels changed on their own, the volume shifted erratically. When I tried to turn it off, it stubbornly stayed on. And just as I was about to unplug it from the wall, darkness swallowed the room. The power was out. Using the dim light filtering from the street lamps outside, I saw water dripping and made my way to the kitchen. The sink had overflowed, water pooling on the floor. As I reached down to stop the flow, my eyes caught the silhouette in the corner, tall with an unsettling thinness and those haunting, soulless eyes that seemed to see right through me. I wanted to scream, but fear silenced me. As quickly as I noticed it, the figure was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart. Scrambling for some semblance of sanity, I decided to leave, but when I looked out, my car was damaged. The windows shattered, tires flat. Remembering my phone, I tried calling for help, but there was no signal. I heard a soft thud from upstairs. Was there someone in the house? Pulling a kitchen knife for protection, I cautiously made my way up. Halfway, the family photos on the wall caught my eye. Someone or something had turned each face down. Reaching the top, my childhood bedroom door was open. Gathering every ounce of courage, I peeked inside. My old teddy bear, which I'd kept on the shelf, was on the floor, a note pinned to it. "I just wanted to say hi, Sarah." Suddenly, I heard a scuffling above. Startled, I watched in disbelief as a large rat slipped from an overhanging branch, falling right before my feet. I jumped back, feeling a rush of disgust. Pushing away my revulsion, I reached for the door handle, intending to distance myself from the unsettling sight. But to my surprise, the handle didn't budge. The air grew colder, and I felt watched. From the windows, I could see the shadows inside my home darting and shifting. Whispers seemed to float from nowhere, too low to discern but clear enough to send chills down my spine. Suddenly, the living room lights snapped on. My eyes stung from the abrupt brightness, and as they adjusted, there it stood, the same dark figure from before, eyes locked onto mine. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, thinking, this can't be real. But deep down, every instinct shouted that it was all too real. In a desperate attempt to confront my fear, I ran at the figure. But as I did, a wave of dizziness hit me. My vision blurred. The storm's cacophony intensified, and my legs gave out beneath me. I awoke the next morning in my bed, the sunlight streaming through the curtains. It felt like a normal morning, as if the previous night's horrors were just a bad dream. But then I saw it. Mud on the bottom of my feet and water stains on my pajamas. Proof that something had occurred. The storm had been real, but was the figure? When my parents returned, they found me contemplating on the couch. I recounted the previous night, but my words seemed far-fetched even to my own ears. They embraced me, their concern evident in their eyes, but I sensed their skepticism. Years passed, and while life moved on, the enigma of that night remained. Now, as an adult, I grapple with the blurred lines of that memory. Did I face something truly eerie? Or was it the storm and solitude playing tricks on my mind? One thing is certain, the residue of that fear still clings, a haunting reminder of the unknown. Story 4. It was just another night, around 9 p.m. I was at my cousin's house babysitting while our parents were out. The TV was on and everything seemed normal, but for some reason I felt uneasy. Maybe I was just nervous about being responsible for my cousin. My cousin was deep into his cartoon, not noticing anything else. I thought maybe locking the back door would make me feel better, but when I was heading back through the kitchen, I froze. There was a man outside the window looking right at us. He looked rough and had this creepy smile as he watched my cousin. I didn't know what to do next. The man at the window didn't just stand there. He tapped lightly on the glass, creating a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Then, with a voice that sent shivers down my spine, he called out, "Is the little one home alone with you?" I felt a rush of cold air, realizing that this man had been watching us long enough to know our parents weren't home. Trying to remain composed, I shouted back, "Who are you? What do you want?" Instead of answering, he simply traced a finger down the window pane, leaving a streak on the foggy glass. "Such a cozy night inside, isn't it?" he murmured. Every protective instinct I had kicked in. Without showing any panic, I told my cousin it was bedtime. "Our parents will be back soon, and they'd want you tucked in," I said, ushering him upstairs. Once he was safely in his room, I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a meat-tenderizing hammer from the kitchen. The man, now absent from the window, was nowhere in sight. I made sure the front door was doubly secured, bolting it tight. Armed with a hammer and a phone, I guarded my cousin's room. I whispered to him, "Stay quiet and under the covers." Dialing the police, they told me help was on its way but would take about 30 minutes. A call to my dad and uncle confirmed they'd be even longer. The man's movements became erratic and unpredictable. After inspecting the bathroom, there was a pause. I strained my ears trying to catch any sound, but was met with silence, the kind of silence that screamed danger. Suddenly, a door creaked softly, and the muffled voice of the intruder filled the stillness. He was humming a chilling off-tune melody that sent shivers down my spine. "Where are you?" he cooed, dragging the words out unnervingly. Come out, wherever you are." Every room on the floor seemed to interest him, with drawers being pulled open and doors shutting with soft thuds. It became painfully clear that he was searching for something, or someone. The mere thought of him finding our hiding spot was unbearable. Suddenly, a floorboard outside our door creaked. My cousin whimpered, burying his face into the pillow. I shot him a warning look, my finger pressed to my lips, signaling him to remain silent. My other hand gripped the hammer so hard that my knuckles turned white. We both held our breaths, hoping the man would move on. He lingered for what felt like an eternity, then sighed and whispered, "I can smell your fear." That statement chilled me to my core, wondering if he really could sense our presence. Finally, after moments that felt like hours, he seemed to lose interest, heading toward the basement. The distant rattle of chains and soft curses suggested he might have gotten himself into a predicament. That was when the distant wail of sirens began to grow louder. The once comforting home transformed into a hide-and-seek playground, and the relief of hearing those sirens was indescribable. Loud shouts from the police officers echoed through the house, followed by the sound of a struggle and then the tightening click of handcuffs. The police later informed me that the man had escaped from a mental institution a province away. Reflecting on that night, I realized that our safety lay not in my strength, but in my decision to stay calm and protect. It's a night neither of us would ever forget. Story 5. Living alone in a rural area has its own brand of quiet. On nights when the sky was overcast and moonlight scarce, the darkness outside seemed almost tangible, as if it could be draped over your shoulders. Inside my modest home, the walls felt a little closer, a little tighter. The only sounds usually were the occasional rustle of the wind or the distant chirping of crickets. It's the kind of quiet that can be both comforting and eerie, especially knowing that not too far away, in some concealed corners, were notorious meth labs. With the nearest neighbor a good distance away, it was just me and my thoughts, swirling in the silence of the night. Sometimes it was easy to feel completely disconnected from the rest of the world, as if my house and I were floating in an endless void of black. The sudden, loud banging on my door jerked me from such thoughts. My heart began to race as I tried to make sense of the noise. The first coherent thought was of my boyfriend. Maybe he had decided to make an unannounced late-night visit. It wouldn't be the first time. But approaching the door cautiously and taking a look through the small glass pane, he changed everything. It wasn't him. Instead, a wild-eyed, bearded man stood there, his face inches away from the glass. His erratic eyes scanned the interior, and his repeated banging became more desperate. My heart pounded so loud in my ears, it threatened to drown out his unsettling presence at my doorstep. Without him seeing me, I retreated, instinctively grabbing the landline next to my bed, dead. That sinking feeling, the realization that I was truly alone, settled in. The movie-esque thought that he might have cut the phone line made it all feel surreal. Moving stealthily, I made my way to the living room where another phone sat on its base. I snatched it up, praying it had a charge. The green light glowed, a glimmer of hope. I quickly dialed 911, the beeping tones feeling disproportionately loud in my ears. The dispatcher's voice was a lifeline. But when she told me the nearest officer was 15 minutes out, those minutes felt like an eternity stretched out before me. "Stay hidden. Stay on the line," she instructed. The man's movements grew erratic. His shouts became more frantic, angry. The dread in me deepened with each passing second, every moment expecting to hear the dreadful sound of breaking glass or splintering wood. But all I could do was wait, clutching the knife and phone, praying for the wailing sirens that would signal safety. I could hear him mumbling to himself, his voice rising and falling in a disjointed cadence. It was clear he was frustrated, maybe even more confused. The continuous shuffling told me he was now at the back of the house, nearer to my old, barely used basement door. My mind raced. Had I locked it last time I went down there? His voice grew louder, the banging intensified, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The soft, almost imperceptible creak of the basement door opening. I gripped the knife tighter, my palms sweaty, trying to recall if there was another way up from the basement apart from those rickety stairs. But my fear-clouded memory offered no assurance. Minutes dragged on. The man's voice echoed through the vents, making it harder to pinpoint his location. Was he still in the basement, or had he found a way up? A chill ran down my spine as I heard a new sound, the groan of the old wooden stairs leading up from the basement. It was clear he was coming up. I braced myself, ready to defend my home and my life. The dispatcher's steady voice in my ear was my only connection to the outside world, my only hope. She kept reassuring me. "They're almost there. Hold on." Just when I thought I couldn't bear another moment, the relieving wail of sirens echoed in the distance. They grew louder, and the intruder's movements paused, replaced by the hurried shuffle of retreat. The final moments were a blur. The police stormed the property, the night lit by the flash of blue and red lights. I emerged, trembling, to find the disheveled man being handcuffed, his wild eyes still betraying confusion. They told me later he was high, lost, and had indeed mistaken my home for somewhere he knew. That night, what had started as a simple mistake turned into the most terrifying hours of my life. Safe in my home once again, the weight of what could have been pressed down on me, a reminder of the fragility of our perceived safety. Story 6. In our San Francisco neighborhood, we lived the typical suburban dream: white picket fences, children riding their bikes, and the distant sounds of city life offering a comforting hum in the background. But my family home hid a story that 2 decades later, I still struggle to accept. The significance of that March evening in 1991 was lost on my 8-year-old self. All I knew was that my parents, George and Martha, were going out to a dinner that was particularly important for Dad's job. They had arranged for our regular nanny to watch me. She was always punctual, always there with her soft smile and comforting presence. But as the minutes turned to hours and she didn't show, my parents' agitation grew. "You sure you'll be okay, Martin?" my mom asked, her eyes clouded with worry. With the bravery that only an 8-year-old can muster, I assured her, "I'll be fine, Mom. I promise I'll lock the doors and wait for the nanny." Reluctantly, they left, and I was thrilled with the newfound freedom. I raided the kitchen, pulling out popcorn and pouring an extra-large glass of Coke. With the living room to myself, I settled in to watch a thriller, something my parents would never have allowed if they were home. However, my excitement was short-lived. A violent storm rolled in, and the lights, as if on cue, flickered and died. I remember the pressing darkness, the way it seemed to swallow the room whole, making everything feel so much larger and scarier. Then, out of the quiet came a voice, small and innocent, yet dripping with a malice that made my heart race. "Hi, do you want to play hide and seek?" It echoed in the room. Panic consumed me. I hadn't heard the door open nor the familiar jingle of the nanny's keys. Who was in the house with me? The voice grew louder and more insistent. "Do you want to play? Let's play." Tears streamed down my face as I cautiously made my way to my room, every creak of the wooden floor amplifying my fear. I slid under my bed, clutching my knees to my chest. Minutes or maybe hours seemed to pass, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. Then the sound of the front door slamming jolted me. Hope surged as I thought of the nanny, but when I emerged, the voice rang out again, clearer this time. "Let's play, let's play." And then I saw her, a little girl, but not just any little girl. Her appearance was the stuff of nightmares, a smooth, featureless face devoid of eyes, nose, or a mouth. Where there should have been expressions or emotions, there was nothing but a blank, eerie canvas. I remember releasing a scream so profound and chilling that it reverberated through the entirety of our home. The moments that followed are fragmented in my memory. The concerned faces of neighbors illuminated by the harsh red and blue lights of arriving police cars, my mother collapsing to her knees when she saw my pale, terror-stricken face, and my father's attempts to shield me from the growing crowd. The journey to healing was a long and winding road. Through therapy, I painstakingly pieced together the remnants of that traumatic night. Dr. Ellis, my therapist, believed that confronting the past was the only way forward. Years after the traumatic incident, the old family home beckoned me again. One weekend, while my parents were out of town, I decided to revisit it. Perhaps it was a desperate need for closure, or maybe just morbid curiosity, but I found myself rummaging through old family chests in the attic. While sifting through old documents, I came across a dusty box with the unnerving label, "Experiments." Inside were a series of old reel-to-reel tapes, photographs of children with obscured faces, and medical tools that looked suspiciously surgical. My heart raced as I set up the equipment and started the first tape. The voice of a child echoed, "Do you want to play? Do you want to play?" The images in the photographs were gut-wrenching. Children with parts of their faces surgically removed or altered, their expressions reflecting nothing but torment. Among them, a familiar face, or rather, a lack of one. The girl with no face. She was real, and she wasn't trying to scare me that night. She was asking for help. A diary lay beneath the paraphernalia. Entries from my parents spoke of their obsession with creating the perfect child, one obedient and compliant. Their twisted experiments were attempts to mold children to their design. As I delved deeper into their demented writings, it became clear that I held a unique role in their nefarious plans. One chilling entry mentioned that they always wanted an observer, a witness to their finished work. To truly appreciate the art, one must understand the original form they had written. Martin, our beloved, will remain untouched to bear witness to our successes and behold the transformation of the imperfect to the perfect. My heart thudded in my chest. They never intended to experiment on me. I was to be the living testament, the one who could compare the before and after, an eternal spectator to their twisted vision of perfection. When the authorities were alerted, an exhaustive search was initiated. The house was unearthed for evidence, leading to my parents' arrest. As for me, had I not been left alone that night, I may have never stumbled upon this macabre secret. A twisted part of me wished they had never left me alone, ensuring I remained ignorant of the horrors they perpetrated, for the truth, once known, became an unbearable burden. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.